Picture this, January 13th, 2012. You're on the Costa Concordia. It's a floating palace, just glittering with light and luxury. A truly modern, magnificent ship with more than 4,000 people on board, all just cruising through these beautiful, calm Mediterranean waters. Honestly, it was supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of safety and modern cruising. But in just a few hours, it became a global symbol of catastrophic failure. So let's dive in and break down how this modern marvel met such a preventable end. And that's the thing that's so hard to wrap your head around. The conditions were basically perfect. The technology was top of the line. This wasn't some epic battle against a hurricane or some unforeseen act of God. No, this was, from the very beginning to the very end, a preventable tragedy, built step by step from a series of unsafe acts and hidden failures just waiting to happen. We're going to break down exactly how it all went so wrong. All right, so the chain of error, where does it start? It starts with a single, deliberate choice, the decision to deviate from the approved voyage plan. This wasn't an accident, it was on purpose. Captain Francesco Schettino himself ordered the ship to leave its planned, safe route to perform what's called a sail by salute. Now, this maneuver, sometimes they call it tourist navigation, was basically a stunt to bring this massive ship incredibly close to the island of Giglio as a show for people on shore. It was completely unauthorized, totally unnecessary, in an unbelievably high-risk move. And this map just shows you how reckless that decision was. It's staggering. That black line, that's the safe, pre-filed voyage plan. The red line? Well, that shows the Concordia's actual path, veering hundreds of meters closer to the coast, steering it right into shallow, charted, and very hazardous waters. So that one really bad decision, it didn't happen in a vacuum. It was made worse, compounded by a whole series of other unsafe conditions and just bad practices on the bridge that turned a risky move into a guaranteed disaster. As the ship got closer to the island, it wasn't just off course, it was moving way, way too fast. I mean, this is a clear violation of one of the most basic principles of keeping a safe speed. It just dramatically cut down the time they had to react to, well, to anything. 16 knots. Okay, think about that. You're in the dark, in a poorly lit area, you're navigating by sight, and you're trying to do a close quarters pass of a rocky coastline. At 16 knots, you have virtually zero margin for error. None. Now, a well-run bridge, it relies on a system we call Bridge Resource Management, or BRM. Really, it's just a fancy way of saying it's a team-based approach. You use all your resources, your people, your equipment, all your information to catch one person's error before it snowballs. Aboard the Concordia that night, this critical safety net, it didn't just bend, it completely shattered. This slide, wow, it really just paints a picture of complete chaos. Let's walk through it. First, you have unauthorized guests on the bridge, creating distractions at the worst possible moment. Second, the captain turned off the ship's navigation alarm, a vital tool, and decided to navigate by sight alone. Next, the chart they were using was the totally wrong scale for this kind of close coastal work. Then, a communication breakdown with the helmsman wastes 8 critical seconds on a rudder command. And underneath it all, you have this passive bridge team that completely failed to challenge the captain's obviously dangerous orders. It was a total breakdown of the safety culture. And this brings us to a really critical question for every single seafarer out there. Put yourself in this situation. What is your duty? Is it to follow orders blindly, or is it to protect the ship and every single life on board, even if that means challenging a superior? The failure to speak up here was just as fatal as the order itself. So with the stage perfectly set for disaster, the inevitable happens. At 9:45 p.m., the ship's port side just slams into a reef, and the situation immediately spirals completely out of control. Now, the captain would later try to claim he hit some uncharted rock. Let me be perfectly clear, that was false. The ship struck Scola Piccola, a well-known, fully charted reef. The impact tore a 53-meter gash, that's huge, in the hull, and that sealed the ship's fate. It was a direct consequence of that unauthorized salute. This timeline it's just chilling. It shows what we now call the critical lost hour. Impact is at 21:45. Just 7 minutes later, the bridge team knows the flooding is catastrophic and can't be stopped. And yet for almost half an hour, they tell the Coast Guard, who had been called by worried passengers, by the way, that it's just a simple blackout. The order to abandon ship, it doesn't come for over an hour after impact, and more than 20 minutes after the chief engineer basically begged the captain to give the order. That delay was absolutely fatal. So the catastrophic failures in navigation and command now led directly to a chaotic, terrifying evacuation with just devastating consequences. Look, maritime law and centuries of tradition are perfectly clear on this. The master's duty is to orchestrate the evacuation and be the last person to leave the vessel, period. Captain Schettino abandoned his ship while hundreds of people were still trapped on board. It was a decision that cemented his disgrace and added to the absolute chaos. This is the number of human lives that were at risk that night. 4,252 passengers and crew members. They were all put in mortal danger by the failures of their command team. And this is the ultimate cost. 32 people lost their lives. They drowned on the ship or in the sea during a panicked, delayed, and completely disorganized evacuation. It was a direct result of the failures in command. The evacuation took a staggering 6 hours. Now, to put that into perspective, the legal requirement is to evacuate everybody within 30 minutes of the command. Because of the delay, the ship was listing so severely that many lifeboats couldn't even be launched. They had wasted the best window of opportunity. The Concordia's evacuation was a catastrophic failure of procedure. And on top of the human tragedy, the wreck was this monumental environmental threat. The ship was carrying over 2,000 cubic meters of fuel. That's the biggest bar you see here. And it was lying crippled with that massive gash in its hull, right inside one of the largest marine reserves in the Mediterranean. The salvage operation to prevent an ecological disaster would become the biggest and most expensive in all of maritime history. Tragedies like this have to lead to change. And the Costa Concordia disaster was a brutal wake-up call for the entire maritime industry, forcing a total reevaluation of safety procedures from top to bottom. And in response, real, tangible changes were made. Passenger muster drills, they now happen before the ship even leaves port, not within 24 hours. Voyage plans are tracked in real time from an office on shore. Access to the bridge is now strictly controlled, and maybe most importantly, there's a renewed, intense focus on bridge resource management training to empower every single officer to be a safety barrier. At his trial, where he was sentenced to 16 years in prison, Captain Schettino claimed he was a scapegoat. Now, while his personal responsibility is undeniable, his words do force us to ask a broader question, right? About corporate culture and whether commercial pressures can sometimes wear away at safety standards. Look, the loss of the Costa Concordia wasn't a single event. It was a chain of broken procedures, terrible decisions, and a failed safety culture. And maybe the most important lesson from this whole disaster is that this chain, it can be broken at any point. It can be broken by one disciplined professional seafarer who has the courage to speak up. The only question left is, will that be you?